Angry tears streamed down the alien girl's face as delegate after delegate condemned her to die at the hands of her warlord captor. Kalar slammed his fist on the glossy black conference table. "Please! She is only a child! We must save her!" The Galactic Council chamber was deathly silent. 12 sentient species shifted in their seats, averting their eyes from the anguished Ventaxian father. Keelar's daughter, Lila, had been kidnapped by Zorgax, a ruthless warlord demanding control of the Ventaxian Empire and advanced weapons. If his demands weren't met, 6-year-old Lila would be brutally executed. One by one, the delegates voiced their refusal to intervene. They feared provoking a catastrophic war, with Zorgax's forces over one insignificant life. Sacrificing the child was preferable to endangering their civilizations. Krone, the reptilian Zorgon delegate, hissed unsympathetically. "It is regrettable, but we cannot risk countless lives for a single child." Kellar's heart shattered as his last shred of hope dwindled, but then a gruff voice cut through the heavy atmosphere. Admiral Donald Reed, the grizzled human delegate, stood tall. "The Terran Alliance will rescue your daughter." Gasps of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Humans were deemed too primitive, too aggressive for such a delicate operation. Their warlike nature made them ill-suited to handle the situation without igniting a devastating conflict. Reed narrowed his eyes, undeterred. He had already lost too many innocent lives in the line of duty. He refused to abandon one more. "My elite Special Forces team will infiltrate Zorgax's fortress and bring Lila home. We'll prove that human tenacity and valor can triumph where others dare not tread." Kellar met the Admiral's unwavering gaze, a flicker of hope reigniting in his chest. With no other options, he hesitantly agreed to the daring human plan. But as Reed marched out of the council room to prepare his troops, an unspoken truth hung in the air. If the humans failed, Lila would perish, and the fragile intergalactic peace would be shattered forever. Admiral Reed wasted no time assembling his elite squad of human expeditionary forces soldiers, each hand-picked for their unique skills. Captain Jake "Hammer" Hawkins, built like a tank, was the team's close-quarters combat specialist. Lieutenant Sarah "Ghost" Chen moved like a whisper, a master of stealth and infiltration. Sergeant Mike "Doc" Johnson, a skilled medic and xenobiologist, would keep the team patched up. Corporal Alex "Maverick" Petrovich, an expert pilot and mechanic, would get them in and out. And Private First Class Emma Sparks Nakamura, a brilliant young hacker, would handle any technological obstacles. Reed briefed the team on their mission to rescue Lila from Zorgax's clutches. He distributed their cutting-edge gear, powered exoskeletons to enhance strength and speed, adaptive camouflage suits to blend into any environment, and neural implants to boost their physical and mental abilities. As they geared up, Reed's wrist communicator beeped with an incoming encrypted message. The anonymous sender claimed to have critical intel on Zorgax's defenses, agreeing to a rendezvous on Omega 9, a neutral space station. Reed's gut told him it could be a trap, but he couldn't pass up any advantage. He informed the team he would meet the informant while they continued preparations. Reed docked his shuttle at Omega 9, his hand resting on his sidearm as he entered the dimly lit meeting room. A hooded figure stood with his back turned. As the informant faced Reed, the Admiral's eyes widened in shock. It was Daxar, Zorgax's right-hand man. Daxar held up his hands. "I come in peace, Admiral. I've grown tired of Zorgax's cruelty. I want to help you save the girl." Reed kept his hand on his weapon. "And why should I trust you?" Daxar produced a data chip. This contains detailed schematics of Zorgax's fortress and the access codes to its security systems, everything you need to get in undetected. "And what do you want in return?" "Asylum. Protection from Zorgax's wrath when he discovers my betrayal." Reed weighed his options. Daxar's intel could mean the difference between success and failure, between life and death for Lila. He made his decision. "All right, Daxar. You have a deal. But if you're lying, there's nowhere in the galaxy you can hide from me." Daxar nodded solemnly. "I understand, Admiral. I won't let you down." Reed took the data chip, his mind already racing with plans. With Daxar's inside knowledge and his team's skills, they might just pull off this impossible mission, but the clock was ticking, and Lila's life hung in the balance. Admiral Reed's knuckles tightened on the controls of the stolen Ventaxian shuttle as it screamed through the atmosphere of Xandor Prime. Corporal Petrovich, hands dancing across the co-pilot's console, whooped with excitement as the craft effortlessly evaded the planet's orbital defenses, Daxar's access codes proving their worth. The shuttle touched down in a cloud of dust, settling on the rocky ground just outside the perimeter of Zorgax's looming fortress. As the team filed out, weapons at the ready, their adaptive camouflage suits shimmered, blending them into the barren landscape. Captain Hawkins took point, his exoskeleton-enhanced muscles coiled and ready for action. He signaled for the team to halt as they approached a group of ragged Ventaxians toiling under the watchful eyes of armed guards. These slaves were being forced to mine the precious crystals that powered Zorgax's war machine. Reed's eyes narrowed as he spotted a young Ventaxian male among the slaves. The boy's features, though worn and tired, were a mirror image of the kidnapped girl, Lila. "That must be her brother," Reed whispered to his team. "We're not leaving him behind." With a series of hand signals, Reed coordinated a lightning-fast assault. Lieutenant Chen seemed to melt into the shadows, reappearing behind the guards and silently dispatching them with surgical precision. Hawkins and Johnson charged forward, their exoskeletons granting them speed and strength far beyond ordinary humans. They made quick work of the remaining guards, their weapons firing in controlled bursts. As the dust settled, Reed approached the wide-eyed slaves, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're free now." The young Ventaxian male stepped forward, his eyes shining with a mix of hope and determination. "I am Kayla," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Lila is my sister. I'm coming with you to save her." Reed hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks of bringing a civilian into the heart of danger. But the fire in Kayla's eyes, and the knowledge that he could provide invaluable insights into the fortress's inner workings, swayed the Admiral's decision. "All right, Kellar," he said, clasping the boy's shoulder. "Stick close and do exactly as we say." As the newly expanded team made their way into the fortress, Kellar proved his worth time and again. His fluency in the Ventaxian language allowed them to bypass security checkpoints, his knowledge of the complex social hierarchy helping them navigate the twisting corridors undetected. But the deeper they delved, the more perilous their mission became. Genetically engineered super soldiers, their bodies augmented with cybernetic enhancements, patrolled the halls, their eyes glinting with malice. Autonomous killbots, bristling with weapons, hovered in alcoves, ready to unleash hell at the slightest provocation, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with the threat of deadly neurotoxins, capable of killing in seconds. Through skill, courage, and sheer force of will, Reed and his team pushed forward, overcoming each obstacle in their path. They fought with a fluidity and precision that spoke of countless hours of training, their movements perfectly synchronized as they danced the lethal ballet of combat. At last, they reached the central chamber, the heart of Zorgax's stronghold. The massive doors swung open, revealing the warlord himself, seated upon a throne of twisted metal. At his feet, cowering in a cage, was Lila, her tiny form trembling with fear. But it was the sight of the Obsidian Guard, Zorgax's most fearsome warriors, that made Reed's blood run cold. These towering figures, clad in armor as black as the void of space, stood motionless, their weapons trained on the intruders. Zorgax rose from his throne, his voice booming across the chamber. "You dare to challenge me in my own domain, human. You and your pathetic band of misfits will pay for your insolence with your lives." Reed stepped forward, his rifle leveled at the warlord's chest. "We're not leaving without the girl, Zorgax. Stand down or we'll take her by force." The Obsidian Guard tensed, their fingers tightening on their triggers. In that moment, the fate of not just Lila but the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The team readied themselves for the fight of their lives, each knowing that failure was not an option. They had come too far to turn back now. The Obsidian Guard charged, their armor glinting in the harsh light. Reed's team opened fire, their advanced weapons spewing plasma and projectiles. Hawkins leapt into the fray, his exoskeleton-enhanced strength sending enemies flying. Chen darted between the towering warriors, her blades finding gaps in their armor with deadly precision. Zorgax lunged at Reed, his energy staff crackling with power. Reed parried the blow, the force of the impact sending shockwaves up his arms. They traded blows, the Admiral's rifle against the Warlord's staff in a brutal dance of death. "I think you can stop me, human," Zorgax sneered, his eyes blazing with hatred. "Your species is weak, inferior. The Ventaxian race is destined to rule the galaxy." Reed gritted his teeth, refusing to be baited. He focused on the fight, on the lives that hung in the balance. Zorgax pressed his advantage, driving Reed back with a flurry of strikes. "Lila is just the beginning," the Warlord gloated. "I will use her to bend the Galactic Council to my will, and once I have the throne, I will unleash a bioweapon that will cleanse the galaxy of all non-Ventaxian life." Horror and revulsion twisted in Reed's gut at the revelation of Zorgax's genocidal plan. But he pushed the emotions aside, his mind racing for a solution. "Sparks," he shouted over the din of battle. "Hack the reactor core, overload the systems." The young technician's eyes widened in understanding. She nodded, her fingers flying over her wrist-mounted computer. Across the chamber, Keller darted past the Obsidian Guard, his nimble form slipping through their grasp. He reached the stasis pod that held Lila, his heart pounding in his chest. With trembling hands, he input the release code, the pod hissing open. Lila tumbled into his arms, her small form shivering with fear and cold. Kayla hugged her close, tears of relief stinging his eyes. "I've got you, little sister," he whispered. "I've got you!" The team fought with renewed ferocity, buying time for Sparks to work her magic. Johnson and Petrovich laid down covering fire, their weapons sending the Obsidian Guard scrambling for cover. Zorgax roared in fury, realizing his plans were unraveling. He redoubled his attacks on Reed, his staff a blur of motion, but the Admiral stood his ground, unwilling to yield. Sparks's voice crackled over the comm, tight with tension. "Reactor core overloading. We have to move now." Reed disengaged from Zorgax, his rifle barking as he backed towards the exit. The team fell in around him, Kellar carrying Lila in his arms. They fought their way through the crumbling fortress, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the reactor began to destabilize. They burst out into the open air, the stolen shuttle waiting for them. Petrovich leapt into the pilot's seat, the engines roaring to life. The team piled in, Reed and Hawkins laying down, suppressing fire as the ramp lifted. The shuttle rocketed into the sky, the fortress shrinking behind them. Lila clung to Keller, her eyes wide with fear and wonder. Reed slumped against the bulkhead, his armor battered and scorched. Suddenly a massive explosion ripped through the fortress, the shockwave buffeting the shuttle. Fire and debris rained down, the once mighty structure reduced to rubble. The team watched in silence as the smoke cleared, the weight of their victory sinking in. But even as they celebrated, a nagging doubt tugged at Reed's mind. Had Zorgax truly perished in the blast? Or had the wily warlord somehow survived, his hatred and thirst for vengeance only fueled by his defeat? As the battered shuttle docked at the Galactic Council's space station, Admiral Reed felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The mission had been a success, but the cost had been high. He glanced at his team, what was left of it, and saw the same weariness etched on their faces. The human delegation erupted in cheers as they disembarked, rushing forward to clap Reed and his soldiers on the back. "Well done, Admiral," exclaimed Ambassador Novak, her eyes shining with pride. "You've struck a blow for humanity today." But the reception from the other species was decidedly cooler. The Ventaxian delegates glared at Reed with undisguised hostility, while the Zorgans hissed and muttered amongst themselves. Even the normally impassive Krellians seemed uneasy, their tentacles twitching with agitation. Kalar stepped forward, Lila clinging to his hand. He searched the crowd for his father's face, but found only unfamiliar stares. A sense of unease crept over him. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. The human delegates took their seats, their faces set with determination. But the other species were quick to voice their displeasure. "This unilateral action by the humans could have sparked a full-scale war," snarled the Ventaxian ambassador, his fists clenched. "Their recklessness endangered us all." "We saved an innocent life," Reed retorted, his voice steady. "We did what needed to be done." But the other delegates were unmoved. They argued back and forth, their voices rising in anger. Kellar sat in silence, his heart heavy. He had hoped to be reunited with his father, to share in the joy of Lila's rescue. But, as the debate raged on, a terrible realization dawned on him. His father was nowhere to be seen. A human aide leaned over to Kellar, her face etched with sympathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but your father, he's been stripped of his position, exiled from Ventaxian space. They blamed him for failing to protect Lila." Kellar felt as if he had been punched in the gut. His father, a respected leader, cast out in disgrace. It was unthinkable. He looked to Reed for support, but the Admiral was deep in conversation with his fellow humans, his brow furrowed with concern. Suddenly, a hologram flickered to life in the center of the chamber. A collective gasp rippled through the room as the image resolved into the sneering face of Zorgax. "Greetings, Galactic Council," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Reports of my demise have been greatly exaggerated." Reed leapt to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm, but Zorgax's hologram merely laughed. "I have seized control of the Ventaxian Empire," he declared, his eyes glinting with madness. "And now I will finish what I started. I will cleanse the galaxy of all non-Ventaxian life, starting with your pathetic council." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted and cursed, their faces contorted with fear and rage. Reed turned to his team, his jaw set with determination. "We have to stop him," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "We have to strike first before he can unleash his genocide." But the other species were hesitant. They argued and debated, their voices rising in pitch. Some called for negotiation, others for isolation. But none were willing to commit their forces to a preemptive strike. In the end, it was the humans who stepped forward. "We'll do it," Reed said, his eyes blazing with resolve. "We'll take the fight to Zorgax, with or without your help." The other delegates muttered and shook their heads, but none raised a voice in protest. They were too afraid, too unsure. They would let the humans bear the burden and the blame if things went wrong. Reed gathered his team, along with Kellar and a handful of Ventaxian rebels who had pledged their support. They pored over the intel provided by Daxar, searching for weaknesses in Zorgax's defenses. Time was running out. Every moment they delayed, Zorgax grew stronger, his fleet massing for the coming genocide. They had to act, and act fast. In a flurry of activity, they prepared for their mission. Weapons were checked, armor donned, ships fueled. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and only they could tip the scales. As they boarded their ships, Reed turned to his team, his face grim. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "Our last chance to stop Zorgax, to save billions of lives. I know I'm asking a lot of you, but I wouldn't have anyone else by my side." Hawkins and Johnson nodded, their faces set with determination. Chen and Petrovich clasped hands, their eyes locked in a silent promise. Nakamura tapped away at her console, her fingers flying over the keys. Kellar stood apart, his heart torn. He was no soldier, no warrior. But he knew he had to fight for Lila, for his father, for his people. He met Reed's gaze and saw the same resolve mirrored there. The ships lifted off, their engines roaring. They streaked through space, hurtling towards their destiny, towards Zorgax's flagship, and the final battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. As they approached the massive vessel, Reed felt a sense of calm settle over him. He had faced death before, stared it in the face and spat in its eye. But this time, he knew the stakes were higher than ever before. They had to win. They had to. Or everything they had fought for, everything they believed in, would be lost forever. The ship shuddered as the first volley of fire raked across its shields. Reed gripped the controls tighter, his knuckles white. Beside him, Petrovich cursed as he wrestled with the weapon systems. "Hold on!" Reed shouted as he sent the ship into a dizzying spiral. They danced and weaved, the flagship's cannons chasing them across the void. But they were too fast, too nimble. They slipped through the barrage, their own guns blazing in response. The flagship's shields flickered and died, its hull exposed. Reed saw his chance and took it. He aimed for the bridge, the nerve center of the ship, the place where Zorgax would be waiting. The ship plowed through the breach, metal screaming and sparks flying. They skidded to a halt, the acrid scent of burning plastic filling the air. Reed was out of his seat in an instant, his rifle in his hands. "Move!" he barked as his team scrambled to follow. They charged through the corridors, their boots ringing on the metal decks. Alarms blared and lights flashed, the ship's crew scrambling to respond. But they were too slow, too disorganized. Reed and his team cut them down like wheat before the scythe. They burst onto the bridge, weapons leveled. Zorgax stood before them, his face twisted in a snarl. He held a blaster in one hand, a glowing energy staff in the other. "You fools," he spat, his eyes burning with hate. "You think you can stop me? I am Zorgax, the destroyer of worlds." Reed raised his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, Zorgax was on him, the staff whirling in a blur of light. Reed ducked and rolled, the searing heat of the weapon passing inches from his face. They fought, the Admiral and the Warlord, in a dance of death. Zorgax was fast, strong, his blows fueled by rage and madness. But Reed was a veteran of 100 battles, his skills honed by years of combat. He parried and thrust, his rifle against the energy stuff. The air crackled with ozone, the stench of burning flesh and metal. The bridge was in chaos, consoles shattering and debris flying as the duel raged on. But Zorgax was tiring, his blows becoming erratic, his defenses slipping. Reed saw his opening and lunged. His rifle barked once, twice, the shot slamming into the Warlord's chest. Zorgax staggered, his eyes widening in shock. He looked down at the smoking holes in his armor, the blood welling up from his wounds. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a bloody froth emerged. The Warlord toppled, his staff clattering to the deck. Reed stood over him, his chest heaving, his rifle still aimed at the fallen tyrant. It was over, they had won. But the victory was short-lived. As Reed turned to his team, he saw the bodies littering the deck, Hawkins, Johnson, their faces frozen in death. Chen, Petrovich, their blood mingling on the cold metal. And Reed himself, a searing pain in his gut, the warmth of his own blood soaking his uniform. He stumbled, his rifle falling from nerveless fingers. Kellar was there, catching him as he fell. The young Ventaxian lowered him gently to the deck, cradling his head in his lap. "You did it," Kellar whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all." Reed smiled, a thin trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. "We did it," he rasped, his hand finding Kellar's. "All of us. Together." His eyes fluttered, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He could feel the darkness closing in, the chill of death creeping up his limbs. But he was not afraid. He had lived a soldier's life, and he would die a soldier's death. He had fought for what he believed in, for the people he loved. And in the end, that was all that mattered. "Tell them," he whispered, his voice fading. "Tell them what we did here, what we sacrificed. Don't let them forget." Kellar nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I won't," he promised, his grip tightening on Reed's hand. "I'll make sure they remember, forever." Reed smiled, a last faint curl of his lips. He took a final, shuddering breath, and then he was gone, his body still and silent in Kellar's arms. The galaxy would never be the same. The war had changed everything, shattered the old order and forged a new one in the crucible of battle. Some would view the humans with suspicion, even fear. Their strength, their resolve, their willingness to do what needed to be done would unsettle those who clung to the status quo. But others would see them as allies, as friends. They would remember the sacrifices of Admiral Reed and his team, the lives they had given to save countless others. They would honor their memory and strive to build a better future, a future of peace and cooperation. And Keller would be at the forefront of that effort. He would work tirelessly to bridge the gap between humans and aliens, to forge bonds of understanding and trust. He would tell the story of the heroes who had fallen, the brave men and women who had stood against the darkness and prevailed. It would not be an easy road. There would be setbacks, challenges, obstacles to overcome. The scars of war ran deep and the wounds would take time to heal. But heal they would. The galaxy would move forward step by painful step into a brighter tomorrow. A tomorrow bought with blood and sacrifice, with courage and determination. A tomorrow that Admiral Reed and his team had given their lives to make possible. And as Kellar stood on the bridge of the shattered flagship, the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders, he knew that he would not let them down. He would carry on their legacy and make sure that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The road ahead was long and hard, but he would walk it with head held high and heart full of hope, for the sake of the fallen and for the sake of the future they had dreamed of. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.